this is our first guest, Marie. Marie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Marie. I'm a teacher. I live in South Georgia. I am a single mom. I have a wonderful, hilarious, vibrant, sometimes very stubborn 6-year-old. And I'm here today to share my story about being married to a narcissist.
Okay. All right. I think that this is going to be really great. I think it's going to be really relatable. And how I know Marie is we go back like, I don't know, 10 years ago. Has it really been that much time?
That's 2015.
Yeah, my husband and her ex-husband, they were in the military together, and that's how we met. And she was one of my biggest support systems out there because I was like a brand new mom and I had this new baby and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So she was one of the aunties.
Oh,
yeah. But I always had fun with Marie because she was like also my foodie friend. So we would always like go and eat a lot. And you're just so hilarious. You always made me laugh all the time. We had it was like a pretty good group of us.
It was.
Yeah. We were
And
like,
I still talk to everybody.
Yeah, it was really
I'm
cool.
still connected to all of them. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I love it. I love it. It was like such a good group of girls, and it was just nice like having a social life, even though I was like a brand new mom. Because I think besides one of them, I was like the only one that had a baby at the time.
Yes.
Right? Which was
Somebody
kind
else
of
had a
weird,
little boy.
right? It was kind of
weird. But it was, I don't know that I've ever really expressed to you how amazing you were then. I can't.
Aw.
That's sweet.
I mean, you were away from all your family and everyone you knew, and you had this newborn baby. And I don't think people really understand, like, too, your husband was in a situation where you couldn't talk to him. He wasn't just away. You couldn't even talk to him. And so, like, looking back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were super mom.
And he had to keep getting recycled. So he was there forever.
Yeah.
It was like, is Jordan going to be 18 by the time he finally finishes ranger school? Like, what's the deal? Like, pick it up, Kyle. But yeah, but it was really cool. And I'm so glad that we all like stay connected. That we just have a certain bond. I think that other people just like don't understand. So it's amazing that we can all stay connected with social media and everything like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to have a girl group like that.
It really is. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and just like jump into this episode. And this episode is about Marie's narcissistic ex-husband, who I also attended their wedding.
Wild.
Yeah, I was at their wedding.
Yeah.
It was a good time.
It was a really good time, except I was pregnant.
It was.
But that's like
you weren't able to.
Yeah, at the end of a really funny story I have to share with you about your wedding, that I don't think you know about, but it's like nice that I can finally share this with you. But we're gonna go ahead and hear her story, and we're just gonna see like what she went through and how she got out of it. So I think we're just gonna do like a little guided question situation, and we'll just let Marie do what she wants to do or say.
Take the wheel.
Yeah. So the first question is like, how did you meet your ex-husband?
Oh gosh. Okay. So back in the day, so when did I meet him? 2014. I had just gotten out of, now here's where everybody's going to think I'm the crazy one, but I promise we'll catch up. I got married the first time when I was 18 to my high school sweetheart, which was just stupid. Like, no bad feelings toward him. We just got married way too young, got divorced. It didn't work out. Easy as that. Like, we got married when we were kids. We didn't even know who we were. But I'd been divorced or I'd been separated for several months, and I was living in Atlanta doing an acting apprenticeship. And I downloaded Tinder. That was brand new. I didn't even know it existed. I really wasn't even looking to date anybody, but one of my good friends on a girl/gay bestie trip was like, how are you not on this? All my girlfriends in Atlanta have Tinder, and they go on these great dinner dates all the time, and that's just how they get guys to pay for whatever. And like I said, I really wasn't interested in dating. But of course I downloaded it. I wanted the entertainment. And like a lot of millennial women sought validation outside of myself. Downloaded Tinder, went on a lot of brunch dates because I figured that way they had no expectation of me going home with them or hanging out late night.
Yeah.
So I matched with my ex-husband, and I remember this very well because it was the day that snowpocalypse happened in Atlanta in 2014. So I was working part-time as a receptionist at a salon while I was also doing my acting apprenticeship at a theater, and matched with him while I was snowed in. And right away, he charmed me immediately. I kind of took all those like Tinder conversations for what they were, and I didn't take any of them very seriously. But he connected with me right away, asking me a lot of questions about myself, which I wasn't used to. Guys typically like to jump right into questions about, sex, or do you do this or do you do that? Like, are we going to hook up when we meet? And he was not like that. He was asking me questions about college and asking me questions about my internship at the theater. He was asking me what kind of food I liked. He told me he wanted to be a filmmaker. It just very different than the conversations I had before. So I quickly gave him my phone number. And this is the line that really stuck with me. He said, well, before I call you, I need to know, is it Sandlot or Little Giants? And I said Sandlot. So
can I tell you which one mine is?
Yes.
I like Little Giants.
Well, retrospectively, I think I would have picked that too. Maybe I wouldn't be in this situation. Why is it Little Giants over Sandlot?
Well, they're both really good. It's just like I think I liked. It was like more. The Little Giants had more of like a girl character role, and I love that she was like this independent person. She tried to be a cheerleader. Devin Sawa was in it, so that's
it was Benny the Jet for me, I think.
Yeah.
So he just, like I said, he was just very different. And he was from Washington State, and I'd never dated anybody really outside of the South. So I was really used to that like cookie cutter frat boy type of guy. So I was in this place in my life where I was pretty confident in like my career path, and I was very independent. I worked all the time because I lived in Atlanta, and that was like right after the second recession of 2012. So like, I was just really driven, and it was the first time I really felt like my dream of being an actress was on track. Like it might be, small time, but I felt good where I was. And so I was like really confident going into talking to him, which I think he targeted. And it's hard for me to explain that, but I'll get there. So we started texting a lot right away, and he called me, which why are you calling me like when we first met? I still don't like when people are calling me when we're texting, but he was very insistent that we talk, like that's a better way to get to know each other. And I kind of found that admirable. Like, oh, he wants to like do this old school. He wants to talk on the phone.
Yeah.
And right away, he was very complimented, like gave me a lot of compliments. Again, just asked me a lot of questions about myself. We really connected on like him being interested in film and me being, an aspiring stage actress, because I wasn't interested in doing anything with film. Everything that I did was very grounded in theater, but we really got along on that level. And like I said, I was used to this like frat boy mentality or like Southern ideal mentality where like the men do the work, the women are there to be trophy wives, are there to like take care of the kids, are there to, fill the like typical female jobs that a woman would do, like a nurse, a teacher, which, it's funny I am now, but he wasn't like that. He was very interested in my independence. I'm going to ramble, so you'll have to stop me. But
I do have a question for you. As the relationship progressed in the beginning, was there any like brown or red flags that you were like, that's not normal, or you kind of dismiss now looking back that you're like, I probably should have noticed that?
Sure. In the beginning, no, I didn't. If anything, it was like all green flags in the very beginning. And
almost too green.
too green. Yeah. I mean, and back, it seems weird to say this because like 2014 wasn't that long ago, but nobody was using terms like love bombing and gaslighting. Like I didn't know what either one of those things was.
Yeah.
I didn't experience any of that before I met him. So like all this constant texting, constant calling, constant compliments, that all just felt really good. You know, like if love bombing lasted forever, then, you know, that's the Disney princess fantasy, you know, Prince Charming coming and like sweeping you off your feet. That's what it felt like. Like I felt like I'd never met a man like this, and it made me feel valued.
When did you like notice that things were starting to change in the relationship, when that stuff started fading away?
Looking back, he was very interested in working out. He talked about that a lot. Like he was very into the gym, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm very into the gym now. I have to work out or I lose my mind. But he would, looking back, didn't see it then. He would ask me to go with him and try to teach me all these different things. And like at first I was like, oh, this is cool. This is something I can do with him. But he would make a point to push me beyond my limit, like, but with a hidden compliment, like you have the body of you could have the body of an athlete. Like you're tall, you're thicker, like you can support more muscle. So like you're stronger than you think you are. You can lift this. And it was disguised with encouragement. Mm-hmm. But what it really was trying to force me to change my body. And I just didn't see that then. Because everything that he was doing was very carefully masked and calculated in the way that he would say it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. But like when we first started dating, like when we would go on physical dates, it was nothing but telling me how beautiful I am. Just constant conversation that like just flowed. There was, I mean, I had on blinders really. I mean, I was totally, loyal to him really early. Like any other, like, I mean, a few days in. Yeah. And that wasn't something he asked of me, but I was just like, wow, this guy's such a good guy. I don't want to waste my time talking to anyone else. Or, you know, I went very quickly from I'm not interested in dating to anyone to, oh, I'm going to marry this person. Right. And it happened like that.
Because he love bombed you so hard.
He hella bombed you. So, okay, so I know that you guys have a child together. Do you think that after having a child, the impact of your relationship dynamic changed?
So it did, but it had more to do with like where he was in his military career than I think with actually having her. Planning for her was definitely a way to fix what was already toxic. Okay. Skylar, I think you'll remember this when he was in the school that that he and your husband were in at the same time. I told you guys how I'd found some of his porn on his phone. Mm-hmm. And that he was really into like bodybuilders, really like into bodybuilder chicks. Do you remember this?
I do remember this.
Okay. So, and I think the website was called Her Muscle, which is laughable to look at now.
Her Muscle.
Yeah. I mean, and it was like a paid for site. This was not like Pornhub or YouPorn or anything that's free. This was like stuff he had subscriptions to. And so that, I guess, now that I brought up the gym thing, those two things definitely went together in my brain of needing to fix my body, of finding that porn. And I found it pretty early. And that, I guess, you know, that's the red flag I ignored. Because it was pushed on us that porn's normal. And I don't judge people who watch it. Do that. Do your thing. I personally don't want my partner watching porn, but there's nothing wrong with like someone who doesn't think it's a big deal. But from where I was, it felt like betrayal. He hid it from me. He lied to me about it on numerous occasions. I would find that he'd been watching it in the bathroom, or I would go through his search history after he fell asleep and see that he was even looking at those websites specifically at work. Oh, wow. Yeah. And it would just be constant or on Reddit or whatever. I mean, it was definitely a porn addiction that I identified pretty early. But I just was in love with him. I was in love with him, and he would love bomb me after he found out, that I knew, and I would confront him about it, and he would get angry, and we would go through that whole cycle over and over again. But see, I'm already lost from the question that you asked me.
It's okay. No, it's okay. No, I love it. I mean, this is what we go on rants all the time.
So I'll go back and forth.
But from what you are talking about, do you feel like there were any like specific narcissistic behaviors that started to become clear now looking back when you were kind of going through stuff like that with him?
Definitely, because it was always, pushed back on me. He would tell me, well, you've gained weight, and so I'm just not attracted to you, and I can't perform if I'm not attracted to you.
Oh my gosh, no way.
Yeah.
I just straight would say things like that. And, I was so manipulated for so long that I just didn't take those things for what they were.
Yeah.
And, growing up, I didn't have the best display of, what a healthy marriage looked like. Like that wasn't modeled for me very well. So
what was his relationship like with his parents?
Yeah.
So when we first started dating, I was under the impression that he had a great relationship with his parents. The first time he went to that school, before I met you guys, he gave me his phone, he gave me his parents' contact information, gave me his keys. This was 3 weeks after we started dating, and he just trusted me with all of that stuff. So I was in contact with his parents really early on, and they would tell me like how happy they were that he had met me, and how cute my southern accent was, and then I used y'all when I texted, and they were part of the manipulation that I didn't see until later. But when he took me home the first time that summer, a couple months later, I just thought they were like the perfect family. They joked each other just enough. They were so supportive. They genuinely seemed to love to spend time together. And so like I thought that I had landed in this like miracle situation. Like I came from this family of parents who were very toxic, and my father is an alcoholic, has been sober for 11 years. So, they have a very different relationship than they did when I was growing up. But again, like I grew up seeing dysfunction, and then I go home with him and I see this like perfect life in front of me. They had this like beautiful lake house. They would take me out to dinner, send me gifts. I mean, it was she was sending me care packages like a week into the school where I'd only been dating, my ex-husband for a few weeks, but I was so caught up in the like love story of it all. It just felt again, like I felt like I'd just been saved by like a white knight. But, so he would throw that kind of stuff back on me, like with the porn, like, well, if you would lose weight, then I wouldn't have such a hard time, or, I just had so many terrible things happen in my childhood that like that was my way to cope early on. And so like we had this big breakdown one night when I was living in Atlanta, and he told me this very, very sad story about something that happened to him when he was little, that kind of shaped who he was. And so anytime he did say something demeaning to me, or he would hurt me, like I would rediscover that he'd been watching porn again, I would always have that in the back of my mind of like, well, he just had these awful things happen to him when he was little, and that's why he is the way he is, and he wants to change. And it's, we're married, or, I'm in love with him, and it's partly my responsibility to help him change.
Right. Because that's what you do for someone you love, right? You like help them. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of dive into like the breaking point section. Okay. Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when were you at that moment when you were like, I have to leave? Like, this is it. Like, I cannot be with this person anymore.
Oh, it happened a few times.
Okay.
So like I said, we had my daughter as like a Band-Aid to fix what was broken from the very beginning. And while I was pregnant, he had some military function to go to where, the spouses don't come because they need that time together. Yeah. So I went and picked him up from downtown. We were living in Columbus at this time, and I was I had to be 8 months pregnant. Went and picked him up, and he was very drunk. He had promised me he wasn't going to get super drunk, but I was upset in the car, and I don't think I actually even said anything. I just was kind of quiet, and he was trying to tell me all these stories, and I just really wasn't paying much attention. And I'm not sure what was said or how we got to the point of him screaming at me. But we were at a red light on Victory Drive, and he was screaming the word weak at me, telling me that I'm a weak person and a weak wife. And so now what I know what happened was it was reactive abuse, but I slapped him, and yeah, just because he just wouldn't stop screaming it. And when I slapped him, he hit me with the heel of his hand, like on my collarbone, and hit me and then hit the back of the seat. And I'm crying, and I'm telling him that Caroline can hear everything. Because, I was 8 months pregnant. I was like, that they're totally aware of sounds outside of my body. And after he did that, he punched the windshield and shattered it in his truck. And I drove up into our driveway on Fort Benning. He got out of the car and went inside, and I was I hate using the word hysterical, but that's what I was. And I drove to a gas station, and I called one of my good friends that I made in Alaska, who was kind of like our mentor couple. We got married at their house. They were 10-ish years older than us, and I'd gone to her a lot with the problems that we were having. And she was always very supportive, but she wanted me to call the MPs, which I did not do because I was in a very, I must protect this man state. And you know how it was in the military. One mishap can ruin their career.
And this is
at
like
this point,
your husband, he's supporting you.
Right.
Like you're about to have a child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So by that point, I'd abandoned those dreams of being an actress, and I'd moved up to Alaska with him and lived there. It didn't work. We moved back to Georgia. I wasn't working. But so I was very hesitant to do that. I called his mother, told her what was going on, and she was just, telling me she was going to call him and try to calm him down. So eventually I went back to the house. I thought enough time had passed that maybe he had just gone to sleep or passed out. But he came out of the house and was banging on the door, like in a very threatening way, telling me to call the MPs, like daring me to do it. Probably knowing that I wouldn't. And I'm not sure. I can't really remember what happened between that point and the next morning, but I remember laying in her nursery, which was unfinished, and crying, like apologizing to her in my stomach.
Aww.
And I thought that would be the time that I left, but it wasn't, and that's the cycle that kept me there so long. He told me he would go to counseling the next morning, that he wanted to start marriage counseling, that he would finally do something about the porn, and that he thought maybe he was an alcoholic, because he told me he would drink at work before he'd come home.
Wow.
There were a couple times I found empty bottles right after Caroline was born, in his truck or in the car. So when that happened, I was like, well, I've experienced this before. This is an addiction. He can get better from an addiction. And so for a long time, that's what I thought it was. And he totally stopped drinking when we moved to Fort Campbell. So our daughter was about a year old, and that year was COVID. So he spent a lot more time at home. He wasn't drinking. That in my memory was a good year where we didn't fight a lot. I just remember thinking, oh, we finally made it. He was an addict. Like, we've gotten through all of this stuff. We're still together. We're going to make it. And, I'd seen that my parents had made it. My dad was sober, and he was a completely different person. And I really believed that's what was happening. But the porn addiction continued. And I rediscovered that. And that's kind of what set off all the bad, all the toxicity again. I rediscovered who he was. And that's what it always was. He could hide who he really was from me for an extended amount of time, and then there would be a breaking point. So, that continued for a long time. And in the middle of all this, I decided I needed to get my master's. And looking back, I think that was my subconscious, like telling me, you have got to be prepared to leave this man and raise your daughter by yourself. And, I had a bachelor's in theater. So what was I going to do with that? So I went back to school and started. It took me several years to finally finish because I was doing it online. I always said COVID was a blessing for me because this like in-person program became an online program. So I was able to get my master's in theater education because of COVID. I took this internship, and by this point, our daughter is like 3 years old. I took this internship that would allow me to get my teaching certificate and finish my master's in Americas. And he was all on board with that plan. The fighting, like I said, it started getting worse. The demeaning, calling me names, telling me that I'm a bad mother, telling me I'm a bad wife, and just the constant flow between that to I'm sorry, you're the love of my life. I don't know what's wrong with me. Let's go to counseling, to looking at porn, to telling me I'm awful. And it just, it would continue that way. And I was stuck in it. So when I moved to Americas to start this internship with my daughter, we were living with my parents, and it became increasingly harder to hide what was going on in my marriage from my family, because the fighting and the undermining and the like relentless criticism, demeaning didn't stop just because we weren't physically together. It just happened in different ways, and it would be 2-3 hour long fights on the phone. About how much he was sacrificing. And that's where the narcissistic trait comes in, I think. He was sacrificing his life as a man and a father and a husband by allowing me to come down here and get my master's. He gave me permission to do that. He told me he thought it was a good idea, but then once I was down here, it cut off that supply that he received from me every day being in person. And then he could only get it from the phone or when he would come down to see us, which was very rare. I mean, because the military is so demanding, and the military always comes first, no matter what. And I was fine with that in that state, that the military would always be number one, and then me and Caroline would come second. And, in a way, that type of sacrifice as a military support is what it is, but mine was in an unhealthy way, right? So I finished school, I graduate. My graduation was something that he took advantage to ruin by not planning anything, and then throwing it back on me that I expected too much. Like, why should I be so celebrated, like so celebratory of my graduation from my master's when he's lived all this time without me? So we really, and that's something that narcissists do, that I've learned over my journey in therapy, that they kind of steal those, like birthdays, holidays. They kind of take that stuff away from you. So as our fighting got worse while I was living here teaching, I just remember a specific fight I had with him, got off the phone, and a good friend that was a mutual friend of ours, who is a male, texted me like an office meme or something that he would do every now and then to both of us or either of us or any of our other group of friends. And you know how tight-knit military friendships become. And I don't know why it was him, but that was my breaking point of keeping everything a secret. After that fight, which was about my grandfather who had passed away in December, the year of COVID, and my ex-husband did not come to the funeral because he needed to stay in Fort Campbell. He had just gotten home from a training out of country, wasn't deployed. It was just a month-long training in a different country. He had come home, and he could have come because his battalion commander came to the funeral, but he did not. And the excuse was, well, I grew up in a family where death was, celebrated. He's gone to heaven. Like, we just don't dwell on that kind of stuff. But this was like the patriarch of my family. He knew very well what this man, meant to us, and even used it in a way that benefited him. He was in the same unit in World War II that my ex-husband was in at that time. So, which is why the battalion commander came to the funeral, because it was such a special connection. And after that fight we had on the phone about that, I just told this friend everything. I told him everything that was going on. And then over the next few months, and this was spring of 2023, over those next few months, he was a big cheerleader for us. I talked to him a lot about what was going on, and it was the first person that I'd ever really confided in outside of my ex-husband's parents. Because his parents knew what was going on the whole marriage. I always called one of them whenever anything was going on. They were present for a lot of our fights when they would visit. And so this was the first friend that I felt safe telling. And he was such a cheerleader. Like I said, he really believed we could stay together, because from the outside, from all of our friends' perspectives, we were this amazing couple. We were the perfect couple. We had fun together. We joked together. We were always the life of the party. And so it was very shocking to him when he found out all this information, and he was just really a big believer. Well, my ex-husband came to visit in April of 2023 and discovered that we had been talking, and, confronted me that I was having an affair, an emotional affair. That was the word I was looking for. And really gaslit me into believing I was having this affair. I thought I had ruined everything. And so we started couples counseling because of my affair. So he was willing to go back to couples counseling because of this affair I'd had. And I never sent a single picture, a single text, said a single thing on the phone that was inappropriate. And he never did either. Now, he would boost my confidence and and tell me you're a wonderful person. I want him to see that in you. Y'all are great together. He would be a support, but never said anything that would cross the line.
Right.
But my ex-husband was a very big believer in that girls and guys cannot be friends. There's no way that you can be friends, because there's always going to be a chance that you'll have sex. There's always going to be a chance that you're sexually attracted to each other. So having those types of friendships was just off limits in his eyes. So we started intensive therapy. And we saw our therapist separately and together.
Mm-hmm.
And over the next couple of months, things would get a little better and things would get worse. And I talked to our therapist separately, and pretty early, she gave me her personal contact information. And I see now, in retrospect, that she was concerned for my safety. So go a little bit down the road, he finds out that I've been talking to our therapist via text message and not over the app that we were using to talk to her. And this is here's where the true breaking point happened. In the summer, I went home to Fort Campbell between the school year of 2023 and 2024. I'd accepted this amazing job in Atlanta that he was getting out of the military. We were going to move to Atlanta together. He'd already been offered a job. And up until this point, I really believed once his military career was over, our whole lives would be different. Our marriage would be different. Our family dynamic would be different. But we had been fighting over and over again up until 2 or 3 in the morning about this affair that I'd had. And we had just had one of those fights the night before. This was in July. I was supposed to move into our apartment that we were going to share together in a week. Our daughter was downstairs watching cartoons. We were upstairs in our bedroom, and this is 9 or 10 in the morning. And we're both sitting on the floor, and I looked at him, and this was really where I was so tired of fighting. And I told him, if you're not going to forgive me, again, putting the blame on myself, I said, if you're not going to forgive me, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep fighting with you about the same thing. I have forgiven you for all the things that you have done, and you are not extending any grace to me. Mm-hmm. And I heard our daughter calling for me downstairs. So I went down there, and she just wanted a different show on. I got it going, gave her a snack, went back upstairs, and he had a bag, a big army green bag, and he had his hand inside the bag. And we just kept talking, and, I don't even know what we talked about, but it just felt like more of the same. And I'm sure I made some other statement about we can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. And he went from being calm, heard Caroline again, went back out there, checked on her, came back in the room. When I came back in the room this time, he wasn't there. walked into the bathroom that was off of our master, and he was sitting on the toilet, like it was closed. He had on all his clothes. He was sitting on the toilet, but he had a gun in his hand. And it like clicked that is what he'd been holding in his bag the whole time that we were fighting. And my initial thoughts were, I have to get our daughter out of the house.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what I said, but I went back downstairs. She was fine. She had no idea what was going on. And he was calling after me. And I don't know why I went back upstairs, but I did. And he was trying to tell me that that's not what it was. He was going to give me the gun as like a symbol of, I'm finally letting this go. This is a gun that I didn't even know he had.
Mm-hmm.
Up until this point, we had never owned a weapon. And I'm telling him I have to leave. And he put the gun up to his head, said, do you think I'm going to kill myself? I'll kill myself right now. Put the gun in his mouth, was 2 inches from my face. And, I'm frozen. And then tears immediately start happening. I call his mom. That was my first instinct. I didn't think anything was going to happen to me. I knew that I needed to get my daughter out of the house, but I also needed to make sure he was okay. I didn't call the police. I called his mom. His mom called him. He was yelling at his mother on the phone, hung up on her as dad was calling me. And then he left the house with the weapon. So I started packing as much as I could into my car. And at the same time, I'm trying to call him and ask him to come home, and that, his life wasn't worth anything that would happen, trying to calm him down. And I had no feeling at all that my life might be in danger. I was so worried that something was going to happen to his military career if anyone found out about it. So I'm on the phone with him. He keeps hanging up on me, and I can keep hearing him click the safety on and off. And he's just telling me what a horrible person I am, how I deceived him from the very beginning, how I had driven him to this. This was my fault, that I was a whore, that I had broken our family apart. His dad is also on the line on and off telling me to, trying to help me figure out ways to find him. I finally got to the point, and in the middle of all this, I'm packing my car. At one point, I'd even put our daughter into the car and was driving around looking for him at his office. I went to the gym to see if I could find his truck. I was driving all over town looking for him, off and on the phone with him, off and off the phone, on and off the phone with his dad. Then I finally called the battalion commander's wife and asked her if she was there, could I drop Caroline off with her? Because Caroline was listening to all of this. And she's 3 at the time. The battalion commander's wife has been around a long time in the Army, and during the thick of everything that was going on in the early 2000s, so she's not stupid. Like, she could sense that there was something deeply wrong. And his battalion commander then reached out to him. And that's when he came home, because I was peeling back the mask in front of people he worked with. Mm-hmm. And so when he got home, he would not give me the gun. I had pretty much packed up the car with as much of our stuff that could fit. There was nothing else I could fit in the car other than Caroline in the car seat. Like, everything else was full. And so I'm trying to coax him into giving me the gun, because I was still worried. I'm still in love with him. I still was worried about him, and I didn't want him to hurt himself. And he started writing a suicide note to Caroline in front of me. And that's the point where I said, if you do not give me the gun, I'm going to call the police. He gave me the gun. I put it in my car. I told him I was going to leave to, save the relationship with his daughter, that I didn't want her to be a witness to what was going on. And he was begging me not to stay. And the apologies immediately, or he was begging me to stay. The apologies immediately started of, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just hate myself. I love you. I love our daughter. You're everything. You're my world. But I did leave. It's probably, 7 p.m. I left Fort Campbell and drove all the way to Americus, which is like a 8-hour drive. But he called me the whole time I was on the road, begging me to come home. His dad called me and asked me to go back, that he would get me a hotel room if I didn't want to stay in the same house with him that night, and that he was going to fly to Fort Campbell, but please not leave, that he was in a state that I didn't need to leave him. But I did not turn around. And that was like my first real step toward strength. But even then, I didn't fully leave the relationship. I was in this very weird place where I'd made this commitment to this school. And we had gotten an apartment, and I was in this panic mode of not knowing what to do. When I got home, I told my mom and my sister everything that had happened and everything that had been going on in the relationship. And they, of course, wanted me to get out immediately. I had an opportunity to stay here and go back to the school that I was at before, but I'd made this whole plan, and I wanted to follow through with it. And I was still stuck in what I thought our marriage was, what I thought our family had become. And he told me that this was the next day, he told me that he was addicted to his Adderall, that he was an alcoholic, that he was incredibly depressed, fed me exactly what I needed to hear. With the addiction. And there's no doubt about the fact that he's addicted to Adderall. I mean, I watched him misuse it for years. But again, that was not something I'd really educated myself about what that can do to someone and how it can alter their behavior. But so he told me that he would self-admit to his commander. He would go to rehabilitation. And I believed it. And I wanted it so desperately. I wanted him to be that person that I thought he was, that I'd met and I'd connected with on so many levels that I'd never connected with anyone on. And so that facade began. I didn't allow him to spend any time with Caroline unless his dad was there. Mm-hmm. So he did come back to the apartment. He saw her maybe a month after. So I took the job in Atlanta. I followed through with my plan. And I really believed he was getting treatment. And he had also had like a religious revival where, like if we put God at the center of everything, then we can be better. And again, it was exactly what I needed to hear. He started coming to church with me. His dad would come to church with us. And this went on for about 8 weeks. He would come to Atlanta on the weekend because he wasn't fully removed from the Army yet. We would spend time together. And then slowly I felt comfortable enough to spend time with him alone. He didn't sleep in the bed with me. So there were still like soft boundaries, but ones that I definitely shouldn't have allowed him to cross to begin with. And one night I asked him a question about treatment and he got very defensive. And it was then that the voice started telling me like, this isn't real. He's not, my gut really started speaking to me. And, our therapist had ended her relationship with him. He verbally assaulted her on a call.
Wow.
So I kind of distanced myself from her because she saw who he really was. And, as part of the isolation that a narcissist creates around you without you really noticing, because she knew who he was and she had been witness to the things that were happening, I had to kind of get her out of the picture. So we started seeing this other faith-based counselor, who he, again, pretty quickly identified what was going on. And we saw him separately as well. So when he got very defensive about the treatment, I knew in my gut, I didn't want it to be true, but I knew that he had fabricated that whole story. And over the next few days, he started repeating behaviors of like getting angry very quickly, yelling at me very quickly, accusing me of still talking with the person.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Oh My Gosh, What? We hope you enjoyed listening to our crazy stories. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And follow us on social media for even more fun content and behind-the-scenes looks. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Okay, bye.
Bye.